Hi, today I'm going to be talking about drawing inside of a grid. I'm going to just give you a few tips and some good reasons why this is one very good way of learning how to do observational drawing. Hi, my name is Luis Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist in the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 25 years now, and I'm here to empower you. So the question comes from somebody who's been following me, and they've been having some trouble drawing on a grid from a photo. Now, drawing from a grid from a photo is a really old way of doing observational drawings in order to get a very accurate drawing based off of what you see. And it's very, very handy, and actually if you're a beginner, it's a good way to do observational drawings. There's a lot of different ways to do observational drawing. There is, just observation. There's the measuring with your fingers, and then there's the types where you're just combination of that, and then there's the envelope way where you're just creating a shape and then trying to create the negative space within the shapes, and there's lots of different ways. The grid method is one of those ways, and it's one of those ways that I haven't even talked about yet. So let me talk about it now. Beginning with, let's say that we've got this photo. So we're going to be using this photo, and we're going to want to draw this photo. So the grid method, what you do is you create a grid on top of the photo in order to be able to draw it. So we've got here a grid, and here so we have here a grid, and so what you do is you create a grid, and yeah, you can number it here: 1 2 3 4 5 A B C D E. And the idea here is that every single it breaks down the drawing into small boxes where you can focus on. So instead of drawing the whole thing, what you do is you focus on whatever is inside the box. For example, now perhaps this is easier to draw one piece at a time than this sort of thing. So this is the idea behind the grid. It's very, very helpful. It means that you're not measuring and then trying to measure how far is this, and you're doing the whole trying to figure out, is this above here, where's the pendulum if I was to do this, and because it's already there, like you've already got the spacing already, you've already got the spacing this way, you've already got the pendulums coming down, what lines up with what that's why it's really, really, really helpful to have this grid. It makes it foolproof in a way. Now here's the problem, and this is where we can get into trouble. Say you're going to do the grid method and you draw the grid like this. Well, we've got how many squares? 1 2 3 4 5 main giant squares, and then we've got 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 big squares here. So we've got really big squares, and we've got the grid here. And if you are a beginner and you're trying to use the grid method to try to wrap your head around drawing, what you end up doing, the bigger the box, the more complicated all the stuff in the box is. So you end up with this whole chunk of stuff that you have to draw inside the box, as opposed to, say, with this grid, we have a much smaller amount of boxes. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. There's less to draw. We can focus on far less stuff, like this, or here we got this. Or here we only got this, or here we only got this per box, so the idea here is that we want to avoid as much complicated stuff as possible. So arguably just this eye in and of itself would be a bit of a problem, because there is so much complexity even within the eye for a beginner. But what I'm saying here is that at least now you at least know that this is how far, this is about where you should start the eye. We're looking at all the space in between here, but it's still fairly complicated. So what we're looking for as a beginner is, how can I simplify it? How can I make it even easier on myself? And the best way to make it easier on yourself is to make the grid even smaller. So like we had this one that was still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. Here, let me move the grid down a bit, so that, because this is about the way you would do it, is you would probably have these perfect squares here, and then you'd have this kind of not so perfect little edge here. So what this does is that it helps us get a little less complicated. So again, this is still a touch complicated in that here we got this. Let me break this down. But there's a lot less of the eye. It starts off in a different spot. So there's still a little bit less complexity here to have to draw than having to draw the full eye. You could abstract it a little bit more. And on top of that, we've got lots of little other shapes here that we have to deal with instead. Okay, so this is an even smaller grid. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We could even go even smaller. Now we've got, look at the nose here, look at the eye here. Again, much less complication. The eye itself is broken up into tiny little bits. So everything here is broken up even more. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So this is 15 boxes across. So you're in the long run, you're making even more boxes. But what this does is it within each box there's less to deal with, less to have to juggle, as opposed to, say, this again. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's essentially, I mean, you've got a lot of complex things happening here. So depending on your skill level, I wouldn't start with a big box grid. I wouldn't start with a grid with large boxes. The smaller, the more manageable it is for you to handle the details. As you get better, you can get bigger and bigger boxes. Like if I'd be able to handle using a grids like this, it wouldn't be a problem to me. In fact, I'd go ahead and not have a grid at all, and I just eyeball it, because I'm a little bit more used to observational drawing. But that said, this is the most accurate way you can get. You want to make it foolproof. You want to give yourself less of a headache. Grid. You know, if you really want to capture what's there, just use a grid. It's foolproof because because of each section of the photo of your reference is broken up into manageable tiny drawings. Each box is an itty bitty drawing. So let's try this. Let's do a drawing in action. I'm going to do this and show you some ways to approach specifically a portrait, because the problem with portraits and drawing people, one, it's the most difficult thing you can possibly do. So if you're starting off doing a person, you're going to have a much more difficult time. I would highly recommend starting something a little bit more simple. Start with a still life, just to wrap your head around the practice of using a grid. Something like, well, let me show you some examples. If you Google still life reference, you get stuff like this. So 3 apples, perfect. Why? Because they're simple shapes. 3 pears would be great too. Why? Because they're simple shapes. There's nothing overly complicated about these objects. A group of apples. This is an actual still life here. Yeah, some pears again. So a handful of apples is perfect. A handful of pears is perfect. If you want to do a cup, let's try to avoid something that's mechanical. Not so. Let's do something a little bit more. This is too much of an object. It's too much of a three-dimensional object. I wouldn't consider this. Let's stick to something organic. I would avoid a bowl with grapes in it, and the reason why I would avoid at first, when you're first learning, avoid grapes, because you may get caught up in trying to draw everything. You're counting them. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, that's not what it's all about. It's not about counting grapes. It's about getting the whole picture. So, highly recommend very simple things like a pear and an orange, or an apple, an orange, a banana. This cloth, try to avoid the cloth right now. It's too complicated. So that's what I would go try to do. Here's some grapes. Don't do the grapes. You'll. This is don't do that. This is just all you're going to be doing is trying to. Oh, how many grapes? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not what it's about. So this is what we've got. Organic, something organic. I mean, later you can try like kettles and pitchers and bowls. Heck, you could even try this after you do like a bit of a still life. This is extremely important to learn to do. Actually, this is a pretty darn good still life reference, because if you're going to start drawing from your imagination, imaginative drawing, these are the forms that you have to master. But for now, if you're doing pure observational drawing, what you want to be able to do is capture what you see, and you have to learn to observe and learn to start measuring and seeing. And one of the hands down, one of the best ways to go about doing it is to have this grid here, and it'll breaks everything down for you. So you draw the grid on your sheet of paper, and the grid has to match exactly the grid from your reference. So this exact same grid needs to be on the page. It has to have the exact same spacing. So the spacing of these boxes have to be the same on your paper. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now, you can, it's actually better and easier if you label all of these for yourself, just in a corner somewhere. That way you can keep track of which one is what, and do the same thing here. Okay, that way you'll always know, okay, in 9A is about here, 9B, da 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 da, and then you're like, okay, this is what's going on. So it's far less confusing if you actually label each row and column. You know what? I am going to label these so that it's easier for me to explain what I'm going to be doing here. So, okay, so I sped this up. I took the time to label all these, and this is going to help immensely for me to explain what's going on. Okay, so now that I've got the grid written out with numbers and letters, now I can very easily say on H, on H7 is where the nose is. Here's 7, here's H, and we can indicate the nose here. On 9, F is where the eyes start, and on 6, F is where the other eye is. So right now I'm just kind of doing these little things here because I wanted to talk specifically about these particular body parts. They're extremely difficult. So let me just get this head shape down for now. And notice here that in my reference, now it's going to be much easier to know what to do in each spot. All we're doing is dealing with each little tiny box. What is happening in C5? In C5, we've got this kind of a shape going on, and then there's like a little bit of a shape here. And now we've got D5. And we're just focusing on whatever is happening in that. And this is the beginning of very of observational drawing. And this is what's happening in E. I'm already messing up. Okay, so I put this in the wrong spot already. C. D is here. Okay, so what is happening in D? This is happening in D. E. This is happening in E right here. F. And in F, we actually get a tiny little bit of this eye shape, but we're not going to worry about it yet. G. Go back to E, just to make sure that I'm getting the right shape in the right location. So I'm looking at this and it's kind of right across. I want to make my lines match. So it may be a little bit ugly, the line, but what we're trying to do here is trying to draw what we see inside the box, like just what's inside this box. And what we're doing by drawing just what's inside the box is getting an accurate, a fairly accurate picture. And you can trust this. To get you what you want. What you cannot trust, what you should keep watching out for, is bungling it, is not drawing what's in the box. If you don't draw what's in the box, in the little square, in that grid, accurately, it's going to look weird. It's going to be off. So this is where the observational training comes in. Make sure that you're drawing what's in each spot. This is F. Man, I'm telling you, the labeling helps so much. Okay, so this is the general head shape of the girl. Now, what we want to do is draw her face. And when it comes to drawing faces, when you're starting out, beginners tend to want to draw noses that look like this. And eyes that look like this. And mouths that look like this. Okay? And then you go, why doesn't it look like a person? Because I understand that yes, you could see that the sides of the nose and the nostrils, and when you're drawing at first, you're not drawing the lines don't define every single little part of the face. Notice how in her face we see this side of that nose part because there's a shadow here, but this side of the nose we don't really see. We as human beings, we're kind of putting that in, that there's another side, there's another edge. But when we're looking at this actual photo and we squint and get it all blurry, there isn't anything here. There isn't a line here. So you got to be aware of things like that. So if we're going to draw a nose or a face, it's best to leave out stuff more than put in stuff. So, for example, we're going to zoom in here, and this is what we see. We see this kind of shadow shape, and then we see this kind of nostril here, and it ends over here in this side. And then notice that the nostril just kind of does this. And that's all we're gonna do. We're not gonna draw every single little thing that we think we see, because it's gonna look terrible. Just imply for now that, like, if you're going to like shade it later, if you're gonna add tone, then you could kind of imply, well, this is kind of where the tone is. This is a little bit of where the shadow is, but not but really what we're looking for, and what you're trying to focus on is the darkest darks. If you were to squint, what parts would be the black? And that's very helpful, because then you can just deal with the parts that give shadow. And when it comes to noses, especially on women, the less is best. The less you do, the better. And I just happen to know a little bit about drawing noses, so I'm going to add a little bit of what I know in here. Okay, so then we've got a nose. Okay, we don't need to get too crazy beyond that for now. Like, once we start, if you're going to do shading or whatever it is, then maybe. And here we got the side of the nose, So we're focusing on this shape here. What's this shape doing? It's a big dark shape. And we've got the eye, and then the eye, we've got this here, we've got this here. I'm drawing this bit here. So it's coming across and down. And I'm focusing on this little bit here. This is the thickness of the eyelid. How far away is that in the box? Look at this. Look at this box shape here. Is this making the same shape? Is this shape here in this box making this same shape? Is this area here the same? And I don't think it is on mine. So I make an adjustment. And where on this box does this start? Like, this looks like it's equidistant. So this is when the box comes in extremely handy. This corner of the eye begins almost in the center. So like about here. So that means that I'm still off. And there, how close does this get? Like, what's this shape here? This negative space here. What's this negative space? And so this is why doing this grid thing is helpful, because now you are able to measure something as complicated as an eye. Suddenly becomes manageable, because you're able to break it down into bite-sized chunks. Where in this box does this belong? And anything that's kind of getting vague, and because the light is kind of hitting it, that's where you stop. Like this is very clear because it's so dark what's going on. But as it gets into light, you may want to leave it alone. You may want to stop. You may not want to draw every single little This is very vague. It's not super dark, so I don't want to overcomplicate it. If you know anything about eye anatomy, there's the muscle here going on. It was auto-saving, so it wouldn't let me draw. Okay, and then now we've got where is this eye compared to that eye? Well, it tells you. That's the best part about this, is that it tells you where it is. So we've got this. What number is this? F. This is F. We follow the line all the way across. This line here. What is this? 9. 9. So this is 9. This is the corner right here. So we got a line here because we're thinking about it, this shadow shape here. We got to think, okay, this box line, this line here is split here, and it's split about here. So this is where the brow is, and this is where that line of the eye is, and it comes about here. This is kind of a shadow shape. Let's leave it light, and that's where it gets dark, so let's make it darker, and that's our line. This is what is called in painting, and well, in science, occlusion. It's an occlusion shadow. Occlusion means that there's no light coming into it. This is often seen as a line to us, and as artists we could just use it as a line. Down here, this eye here is making a line, but it's not really a line, it's the thickness of the eyelid above the eyeball, creating a shadow. And it's extremely helpful to us as artists as we're drawing this. And notice that the iris begins right at this corner. This is really great. Usually want to avoid tangents when you're drawing on your drawing, but and see how much of this entire line the pupil takes up. Let's not take any more of that up than it is. But as artists, we're trying to avoid tangents, but when it comes to a grid, tangent is our friend. It gives us location and scale. And this tone is very light. Let's just kind of imply that. We don't want to make a line out of that, like a big thick line. And then this underline, this shadow shape here, this defines the thickness of the eyeball underneath, like as it turns, and the skin underneath. And so where does this lie on this line here? It goes like this, very lightly imply it here. Where this is, we're trying to define here in line form that this is the end of this line of the eyeball here. So I'm going to get rid of this rough line that I had already put in here. There's a tiny, tiny, itty bitty little line coming out of here. And then again, everything that I'm drawing is within this box. And then this little box here, it tells us that there's like the tear duct is here. And then this is the side of the nose. Where does this fall? About here. And it's very light, very, very light. We don't want to like we don't want to do the nose like this and the eye like that. Now that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. In fact, we could even make it even more interesting by making this going in this direction, make these two, make this almost a straight. Make this almost a straight. Not an almond shape, but a straight. And this actually makes her look more feminine. Surprisingly enough, if we make this a little bit straighter and darker and thicker, and we even do this to it, it's like giving her eye really thick eyelashes, and it makes her look even more feminine. Instead of doing this, we're doing this, and it makes her eye look a little bit more feminine. And this, you could see, goes in here. It actually interlocks. And so we've got the eyes, and it's creepy looking because it doesn't have any eyebrows. So let's deal with the eyebrows. So there's a space here, so we don't want to get any further than that. This is the top. So now we've got, that's the general eye of our person. Now it doesn't quite look all that pretty because it's a line drawing. Later we could come in So now we can come in and just with a pencil very lightly too dark. Had a bit of trouble with some lag and some lack of control with the computer is having some trouble with letting me use my work here. And part of this is that the line work is a little bit too dark. So that's how it works. This is how the grid method works. And again, these are I was just trying to show you how to use the grid and to do eyes and noses, because at the end of the day, no matter how good and accurate you get this grid and the position of all the parts, if you end up not knowing how to finish a face and your face ends up looking like this, it's because you were drawing too much. So what I wanted to do was give you some tips about how to look at a drawing, what to actually draw, see if you can try to capture without putting everything in there, because a lot of the things that you're doing is setting up for a tonal drawing. And you don't want your drawings to be too linear. There's too much line, too much information. You're adding too much information in the lines. You want to keep your line work simple, not like this. Don't draw what you think it should be. Draw what you see. So very, very simple kind of shapes like this. Not like this. Because then you could add the tone on top and try to capture the tone, because that's actually what is making what you think is this is actually the tone. The tone is what's doing that. Okay? So I hope that's helpful. I hope that shows you how to use the grid method to draw from reference, why it's helpful to do the grid method, and when you're doing the grid method and you're doing very complicated things like a portrait, this is a good way to approach it. Now I'm going to, and again, I'm telling you, ideally what you want is to do simple still lifes, pears, apples and pears and oranges. Try to avoid grapes. Try to avoid at first inorganic objects and cloth, because cloth is a more complex thing. And then, I mean, you could slowly make your way up to something like this with a frigging skull in it. But at first, pears. Very simple shapes, so that you can get the hang of doing the grid method. And then once you get the hang of doing the grid method, maybe you can try to tackle something as complicated as a face or a portrait. But baby steps. Just give yourself something, give yourself an easy win. All right. So I hope this has been helpful and informative. I'd like to thank all my current patron supporters. Aaron Garcia, Ohobo, Anastasia, Bill Fisher, Bill Munier, Binny, Brooke Brown, Chanel Winja, Eric Preston, Eric Salham, Gallo Viking, George, Heather, Ingrid, Hayek, Kent Dirk, Crunch, Lynn, Madeline Dupreez, Mary Charles, Michael Rasmussen, Nathan Seabolt, Rain, Shopping for Noobs, Sterling L. Brooks, Stephen Howard, Steve R., Tamara M. Cotton, Tim Bassarath, Ulf Meyer, William Bell, a young Stormlord. Thank you for your support. If you would like to support me, there's a link to my Patreon below. Thank you so much for supporting me, my patrons. I really greatly appreciate it. And I will see you next time. All right, bye.